Welcome to the Sunday Signal. I am David Richards, and this is the audio version of my weekly newsletter on AI, business, and the future of work. If you are new here, welcome. If you find this useful, the single best thing you can do is follow the show wherever you listen and share this episode with one person who needs to hear it. It costs you 30 seconds, and it makes a genuine difference to whether this show grows. This is issue 48. Sunday the 5th of April, 2026. This week's title is The Consultants Are Selling You a Lie. I want to start with a scene. A major research and advisory firm stands before 6,000 of the world's most senior technology executives in a conference hall in Barcelona. The message is reassuring. AI will create more jobs than it destroys. Humans will be amplified, not replaced. The workforce will be transformed, not eliminated. The audience, which collectively manages billions in technology budgets, exhales. They book their tickets to next year's conference. And 14 weeks later, the man building the hardware that every AI system on Earth runs on stands before investors in New York and says something entirely different. He says all software will become agentic, not some software, all of it. He says the passive tool licensed by the seat, operated by human hands, is already architecturally obsolete. Every software company on the planet, he says, will have to rebuild itself around this or become irrelevant. And somewhere between those two events, one of my team sat down with a founder for a conversation. 60 minutes later, there was a business plan, a working prototype, and a company website. No developers, no committee, no specification cycle. These three things belong together. And this week I want to explain why the picture they create is not the one being sold in the CIO subscription pack. I have three stories this week. First, the 4 specific ways Gartner's jobs forecast fails, and a brief review of what they have got spectacularly wrong before. Second, Jensen Huang's declaration at the Morgan Stanley conference in March. What it means when the most important infrastructure company on Earth says every piece of software will become autonomous. And third, the response to my Yorkshire Post column on the SaaS moat and what the people still in denial are actually saying out loud. The layoff tracker closes it. 80,700 roles tracked in 2026 so far. 6,200 of those went in the last 7 days. The Big Four audit pyramid is in structural collapse. If you have not already followed the show, now is a good moment. Hit follow on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube before we get into it. It means the next episode comes straight to you. Let us get into it. Part 1. The 4 failures inside Gartner's jobs forecast. Gartner's headline from their November 2025 IT symposium was this: starting in 2028, AI will create more jobs than it destroys. By 2030, 25% of IT work will be done by AI alone, 75% by humans working alongside AI, and 0% by humans without AI involvement at all. Their recommended response for chief information officers is to restrain new hiring, especially for low complexity roles, and reposition talent toward higher value work. It sounds reasonable, it is not. Here are 4 reasons why. The first failure is what I call the junior talent death spiral. Gartner treats entry-level, low-complexity work as a category of expendable busy work. It is not. It is the apprenticeship. It is where the next generation of senior professionals learns how organizations actually function, how to make decisions under pressure, how to handle being wrong in a client meeting, how to develop judgment that cannot come from a training manual. Gartner recommends chief information officers automate this rung, remove the rung, and the ladder disappears. No ladder, no experts, no augmented workforce. The second failure is the efficiency and volume trap. The new jobs argument rests on an economic assumption that held during the Industrial Revolution, but does not hold in finite knowledge markets. The assumption is that if a task becomes 10 times cheaper and faster, we will simply do 10 times more of it. If an AI can handle every first-line support ticket for a 5,000-person organization, that organization does not hire 10 times the support staff. It keeps 2 people to oversee the system and eliminates the other 30. That is not transformation. That is subtraction. The third failure is what I call the work slot problem. Gartner's own analysts admitted in Barcelona that humans are less ready to capture value from AI than the technology itself is ready to deliver. They warned about skills atrophy as workers offload tasks to machines. What they did not say is that we are watching the consequence in real time, a proliferation of AI-generated output that is not good enough, code that compiles but breaks, analysis that sounds authoritative but is wrong, documentation that is grammatically perfect and factually hollow. Fixing, verifying, and securing this output frequently takes more human time than producing the original would have done. The job becomes checking the machine. That is not augmentation, it is degradation. The fourth failure is the historical precedent problem. The optimists always reach for the car and the horse. The automobile killed carriage making and created automotive engineering. Disruption made new categories of skilled work. Therefore, AI will do the same. The problem is structural. Every previous wave of automation moved human labor up the value chain, from physical to cognitive, from manual to managerial. AI targets cognition itself. There is nowhere further up to go when the machine can already reason, code, write, and analyze at a level that exceeds the median knowledge worker. Nobel laureate Darren Acemoglu has named this so-so automation, technology that is precisely good enough to replace a human, but not good enough to spark the next economic boom. It raises margins while hollowing out the middle. That is not progress, it is compression. Gartner does not mention Acemoglu. And before you place too much trust in this forecast, it is worth spending 60 seconds on Gartner's track record. In 2011, they predicted Windows Phone would hold over 20% of the global smartphone market by 2015. Windows Phone died at approximately 2%. In 2017, they predicted blockchain would generate over $3 trillion in business value by 2030, and that most supply chains would be running on it by 2023. By 2019, they were acknowledging that 90% of enterprise blockchain projects had failed to leave the pilot stage. They predicted tablet sales would reach 450 million units annually by 2016, and that the personal computer was heading for obsolescence. Tablet sales peaked and declined. The laptop survived. The pattern is consistent. Gartner predicts possibility, not reality. Adoption, timing, and consequences are where they fail, and they are chronically biased toward the optimism of the audience writing the checks. If you tell a chief information officer that AI will replace 25% of their labor costs, they consider buying the software. If you tell them it will create 25% more jobs, they buy it and feel progressive about it. The second story converts better. Gartner knows this. Part 2. Jensen Huang did not come to comfort you. On the 4th of March, 2026, NVIDIA's chief executive, Jensen Huang, appeared at the Morgan Stanley Technology, Media and Telecom Conference in New York. It was widely described as a warm-up act for NVIDIA's GPU technology conference 2 weeks later. It was, in practice, a declaration of strategic intent. His central statement was unambiguous. I am going to read this slowly because it matters. There will be no software in the future that is not agentic. How could you have software that is dumb? And so it is absolutely true that every software company will become an agentic company. Not some software, not enterprise software, not AI native startups. Every software company, all of it. Huang's argument is structural. The software as a service model, in which software is a passive tool licensed by the seat and operated by human hands, is already obsolete in its architecture. The future is software that receives an instruction, reasons about what to do, and executes it without human intervention at each step. His comparison was to workforce management. Just as companies today manage a mix of full-time staff, contractors, and specialists, they will soon manage a portfolio of proprietary internal agents and externally rented agents, each deployed for specific tasks and outcomes. The business model shift is profound. Today's software companies sell licenses. Tomorrow's will rent out agents to do work and will sell what Huang called specialized tokens, representing specific expertise and output. Value no longer sits in the code. It sits in the outcome the agent delivers. Huang also confirmed that NVIDIA will invest $30 billion in OpenAI, describing this as likely their last opportunity to invest before the company goes public. Their $10 billion position in Anthropic may also be a final private market stake. These are not hedging gestures. They are bets on the companies whose foundation models will power every agentic system built over the next decade, running on NVIDIA's hardware. Gartner is describing a transition. Huang is describing an endpoint. The irony is visible if you look for it. In November 2025, Gartner presented to 6,000 chief information officers that the future would be humans amplified by AI, orchestrated by the chief information officer. 14 weeks later, the man building the infrastructure that future runs on said clearly that there will be no software left that does not think for itself. In Huang's architecture, the chief information officer does not orchestrate the system orchestrates itself. Part 3. The moat has gone. Some people have not noticed yet. This week I published a column in the Yorkshire Post making a straightforward argument. The economic foundation of the software as a service industry is collapsing, not at the edges, at the centre. The evidence was concrete. One of my team sat with a founder for a conversation. That conversation fed into Claude, became a detailed business plan. The plan went into Claude code and became a working prototype and a website. 60 minutes, start to finish. No committee, no developer, no specification cycle, no design sprint theatre, a company ready to talk to customers. The piece generated 26,000 LinkedIn impressions within 24 hours and over 100 comments. The range of responses told you more about the state of this industry than any Gartner survey. Some people understood immediately. One commenter observed that the software moat had been draining for some time and that AI had simply pulled the plug. Another made the point that speed to prototype removes the theatre and forces the truth. The first real test of a business is whether someone pays. A third noted that the moat was always distribution and trust, not the code itself, and that it had simply taken this moment for that to become undeniable. But a significant number of responses came from people who are not yet ready to accept what they are looking at. One called the piece attention-grabbing hyperbole and demanded to be shown a company created in an hour that used to take 12 months. Another questioned how I could feel comfortable making the claim. A third dismissed it as lazy slop, written by AI devoid of humanity. One, deploying a form of reasoning that will be familiar to anyone who has followed previous technological shifts, argued that because Microsoft and Salesforce remain large companies, the entire argument is false. I understand the instinct. When your professional identity is built on the assumption that software requires years of training, expensive tooling, and specialist teams to produce, the idea that a conversation and a lunch hour can replicate the output is not examined. It is rejected. But one comment stood out for its honesty. A director of engineering observed that code has never been a moat. He is right. What the software as a service industry sold was not code. It sold accumulated complexity, switching cost, and the time required to build an alternative. AI has compressed the time. It has not eliminated the complexity of running a genuine business. You still need customers, revenue, operational infrastructure, and the 1,000 unglamorous things that happen after a prototype exists. But it has moved the fundamental question from can anyone build this to why would anyone pay for this when they can build it themselves? For a great deal of existing software as a service, the answer is increasingly, they would not. Salesforce is not dead. The long tail of software as a service, the thousands of competent point solutions charging 12 seats a month for something a capable team can now assemble in an afternoon, is a different story. Huang told you where that story ends. Gartner will tell you it ends in a jobs boom. One of them has financial skin in the game. The other is building the machine. Part 4, the Sunday Signal Tech, an AI layoff tracker, week 15, 29th of March to the 4th of April, 2026. The 2026 year-to-date total stands at approximately 80,700 confirmed and tracker-based job losses. That is up from approximately 74,500 last week, a week-on-week increase of approximately 8.3%. Approximately 6,200 roles were added to the tracker this week alone. Let me run through the entries. PricewaterhouseCoopers in the United States is a new entry. Approximately 1,500 roles. Stated reason, AI transformation, with audit and tax automation specifically cited. Market reaction was positive, up 1.4%. Microsoft is developing. We are tracking a signal of over 500 roles in what appears to be a quiet restructuring linked to Azure Stargate liquidity realignment. No single announcement, but consistent internal signals, market reaction, neutral. Capital One is confirmed. 1,139 roles linked to AI-driven integration following the Discover acquisition. Market reaction, positive. Oracle is ongoing, approximately 1,000 roles in what the company describes as a wave 2 of its OpenAI compute pivot. Oracle stock rose 2.1% this week on the news. KPMG in the United Kingdom is confirmed. 600 roles directly linked to the audit agent rollout. Market reaction, neutral. Meta is ongoing. 700 roles cut from Reality Labs to fund Llama 4 development. Market reaction was negative, down 2.8%. Now let me explain the two most important signals in this week's data. The first is what I'm calling the Stargate squeeze at Microsoft. The Stargate supercomputer funding timeline is creating internal pressure that is showing up not in headline announcements, but in quiet reductions across non-AI divisions, hardware teams, secondary Azure services, roles that cannot be directly mapped to the OpenAI project cost structure. This is how large restructurings now happen, not in headlines, but in drift. When cuts are too small to announce, they are often too large to miss. The second is the audit agent domino effect. As anticipated, the threshold has been crossed. PricewaterhouseCoopers has confirmed approximately 1,500 US roles cut, targeting audit and tax departments specifically. This is not a restructuring, it is a structural collapse of a business model. The Big Four business model has always rested on a pyramid of junior graduates performing manual verification at scale, matching invoices to purchase orders, checking figures against source documents, flagging exceptions for senior review. The audit agent does not sample 1% of transactions. It processes 100% in real time via direct application programming interface access to enterprise resource planning systems, using fine-tuned models trained on decades of accounting standards documentation. By tracker-based estimates, the work that previously required 5,000 graduates annually is now approximately 99% automated. The professionals who remain are not accountants. They are AI systems auditors. Their function is to verify that the agent has not suffered logic drift, that its reasoning chains connect cleanly to source data, and that no client has inadvertently instructed the system to overlook categories of financial loss. If you cannot read the traceability map of an AI decision, you are a legal liability to the firm, not an asset. On market divergence, Oracle rose 2.1% this week on confirmed cuts. Capital One's reductions were received positively. Investors are treating payroll as technical debt being converted into productive compute. Meta tells the opposite story. 700 cuts were met with a sell-off because investors are questioning whether the $135 billion compute bill can be justified against current revenue. Cutting humans is no longer sufficient reassurance. The direction of the cuts matters. High probability targets for week 16. Salesforce carries the highest risk on the tracker. Agentforce 2.0 has reached internal peak maturity, and business development and sales development representative roles are the logical next liquidation target. Deloitte must match the PricewaterhouseCoopers and KPMG moves to maintain competitive audit pricing. Alphabet faces a projected $185 billion capital expenditure requirement against a Gemini user base that is not yet sufficiently monetized. ServiceNow's chief executive has publicly claimed 90% automation of back-office support, which means those support roles are on borrowed time. Labor is the new interest expense. In 2026, every person on a payroll is a unit of liability to be justified against the performance of an AI agent. The justification is becoming harder to make. Final thought, Gartner will update its forecast next year. It will include new charts, new language, and new frameworks to explain decisions that have already been made. Huang is not publishing forecasts, he is building the outcome. The gap between those two things is where entire careers disappear. Most people will not notice until they are inside it. Thank you for listening to the Sunday Signal. If this episode made you think differently about something, please share it. Send it to one person in your network who works in consulting, software, or financial services. Forward it to your team. Post it. The show grows entirely through word of mouth, and your share is worth more than any advertising budget. You can read the full newsletter at newsletter.djr.com. unfiltered.ai, published every Sunday morning. Every episode has a companion article with the sources, the data, and the full layoff tracker table. If you are listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please take 60 seconds to leave a rating or a review. It sounds like a small thing. It is not. It is how new listeners find the show, and it is the most useful thing you can do if you want this conversation to reach the people who need to hear it. Follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Links are in the show notes. Until next Sunday, I am David Richards MBE. Thank you for listening to the Sunday Signal.